You know, when Trump said you don't have the cards, who knew he was talking about PSA? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggerhouse. And in this one, we need to talk about tariffs. Uh-oh, everyone's favorite topic. That's right, the hot button issue is once again making its way to comic book collecting land, or at least collectible land for now, but perhaps comic book collecting land in the future. Because as you guys can see from the headline in front of you, leading trading card grader pausing submissions from Canada, China, Mexico, due to tariffs. So in this video, we're going to talk about what's going on over at PSA, talk a little bit about the current situation with the tariffs and if it's going to actually raise comic book prices, and then later on in the video, speculate on if CGC is going to be next. But of course, before I get into it, if you guys could like, comment, subscribe, I appreciate it. Helps for the channel do those things. But there you guys have it. Leading trading card grader pauses submissions from Canada, China, Mexico due to tariffs. I'm going to read a little bit of this article just to give you guys a little bit of, the overall picture. But as you guys can see, PSA already feeling, the effects of what is going on with their card submissions due to this recent announcement coming out of the White House. The collectibles industry will feel the effects of the increased tariffs placed upon countries Tuesday by the U.S. government. Professional Sports Authenticator, PSA, the world's most prominent trading card grading service, announced it will temporarily pause direct grading submissions from Canada, China, Hong Kong, and Mexico because of the tariffs. With this pause in place, customers in these countries will be unable to complete direct submissions in the online submission center at psacard.com. The company announced the statement on Tuesday. Should any submissions be completed and sent to the U.S. from these countries, customers who send them will be financially responsible for any tariffs, duties, and other taxes incurred by PSA. The U.S. tariffs are an additional 10% on imports from China and 25% on almost all imports from Canada, Mexico, according to the New York Times. The Chinese Finance Ministry announced tariffs between 10 and 15% on a variety of U.S. imports. Canada imposed 25% tariffs on $30 billion worth of U.S. goods Tuesday morning without immediate specifics on items. The article kind of goes on to explain what PSA is, but, let's kind of dig into this, guys, give some commentary. Are you somebody out there that is a PSA submitter? Are you somebody out there who is a Canadian resident? Did this kind of affect your recent desire to send in cards for grading? Because pretty crazy stuff, at least, when you hear this stuff going on in the news and then you actually see a company like a PSA actually, enact a policy that they're going to immediately put these tariff costs onto, the international submitters out there. And even though I know most of you guys are comic book collectors, I mean, it does sort of make you wonder, is CGC going to start to do the same? Now, I speculate that they're going to have to address this in some kind of way. I mean, I don't know what the size of their business is that comes out of Canada. I don't know if this is actually going to be a major issue for them. Clearly, it was for PSA. And I have to assume that they got out in front of this in order to kind of, protect themselves. I mean, I think there's still a lot of question marks onto, how, some of these, tariffs are actually going to hit. Is it something that they can just eat for the time being, or is it something that, isn't actually going to affect their margins? It's very interesting stuff. And actually, if you're somebody in Canada who does submit a lot to CGC, have you actually heard anything from them, or have they, sent any kind of private messaging to you or some emails, over this last couple days or so? I would be very interested to hear what CGC has to say. Now, moving, away from kind of the collecting side of comics and more of the kind of modern publishing side of comics, this article on Bleeding Cool also revisited this subject. As you guys can see, USA imposes new tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China, including on comics. Now, maybe the title is a little bit misleading. It's going to make its way to comics. It's not necessarily that they tariffed comics specifically, but it is going to have an effect. And as you guys see from the article summary, USA imposes 25% tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and raises China tariffs affecting comic book industry. That's more appropriate, right? They're using affecting versus including. Canadian PM Trudeau retaliates with 155 billion U.S. good tariffs, escalating trade tensions. Comic book printing costs rise. Publishers face challenges with options, quality, and pricing. Tariffs may benefit some U.S. jobs, but publishers see risks to operations and infrastructure. I'm not going to read the whole article. I'll put links to the description for you guys to kind of check it out yourself. But I did read the entire thing, and actually one of the articles linked to this was actually a very good article over on the Comics Journal as well. This was one that came out earlier this year in January when this was just kind of, in the talking phase. As you guys can see here, it says, what will potential tariffs mean for comic publishers in 2025? Will likely have less customers. Now, I think it's really interesting, and it's kind of hard to commentate on all of this stuff because I'm not going to pretend like I'm an economist and I'm a tariff expert, nor am I a giant publisher who operates at the scale, the likes of some of the people that were quoted in this article. But if I could add a little bit more context, at least, from an anecdotal point of view, I really do think that disruption here in this instance, when it comes to comic books, is probably a net positive. Now, that's not to say that I think it's a good thing that everyone's going to have to pay, 25% more for their comic books, or that the margins for publishers are going to have to shrink, or that they have to pass on the burden to a lot of their customers. But I do think that them having to sort of reevaluate, what they've been doing for these last 20 years can be a good thing. I think there can be a silver lining here. In fact, if you want to steelman it and be the most, charitable interpretation of what the tariff is supposed to do, it's supposed to cause this disruption. It's supposed to incentivize companies that are using, publishers overseas to kind of look inward and decide, hey, is there a better way to do this by using some of the printers and vendors, domestically? Could there be better ways to do it? And, as somebody who went to Comics Pro, I did find it very interesting that I actually met a couple of printers, people that owned printing companies at the show that were aggressively trying to acquire people's business. They were going to every single publisher, every single table, asking, hey, where did you get your comics books printed? Here's my card, here's my business. And, as someone who has done a little bit of, the independent Kickstarter printing, I will say that there is no question that printing your comics over in China is definitely the most cost effective. Obviously that's what China does. Made in China is a thing for a reason. They have, a much larger manufacturing infrastructure over there, which, also includes printing comic books, and it is cheaper to do it if you are doing it at scale. Although, I do think that there are a lot of, American printers right now that are doing a pretty good job in being pretty competitive with a lot of the prices out there. The problem is that you have to just do the work to find them. I think that that's really, one of the big things. And, it is really annoying to have, a lot of the publishers feel like, oh, this is going to change everything. And this is a lot of disruption. And I'm used to, having to go to Canada and print over there. And now I'm just going to have to eat this 25%, a tax on top of everything. Or you could find someone locally that can do it for you cheaper. It really does exist. Sometimes you're over at AT&T and you think you're getting a good rate for your cell phone bill. And then when you look into it, you're like, oh, actually, I could switch to T-Mobile and save a lot more money. Or, you have a certain insurance with Geico. And then you're like, oh, I should probably switch over to Allstate, because hey, the rates are cheaper now, or they want my business. And I think that that's really, the most charitable version of what the tariff is supposed to do. Again, I don't have a horse in this race, guys. I'm not on either side of the aisle here. I'm just kind of commentating on what I see with a lot of the commentary, coming out of the publishers talking about these issues, and that, yeah, there is going to be a lot of short-term pain, going on with these tariffs. And overall, I think that, it's unfortunate that at the end of the day, it is going to get passed off to the end user, to the consumer, to the customer. But at the same time, maybe it's going to be a net benefit in the long run, or at least, get people starting to think outside the box, much like, the silver lining is, with things going on with diamond distribution right now. I do think that, from the ashes, the phoenix will rise. I think that there's going to be, a better model that comes of it. And it's not to say that I, want bankruptcy or anything like that to happen on anybody. Of course I don't want that. But, generally speaking, it does sort of feel like, this system that was going on had some issues, had some flaws, and needed to kind of be fixed. And I really do think that that's true with a lot of the modern publishing industry as well. Now, what's interesting with this is that the article goes on to talk about how, at this point now, Marvel Comics actually does most of their printing domestically. It's really DC that is going to have, the biggest hit with this whole thing. It's really up to DC to figure out what they're going to do, because of the big two, they're the ones that do print internationally, most of their comic books, and how that ultimately shakes out. If they have to increase their prices by, say, 25%, will that force Marvel to also increase their prices by 25% because they want a price match? Or maybe it works the opposite way, where if Marvel doesn't have to increase their prices by 25%, maybe DC says to themselves, hey guys, this is something we actually have to eat because we can't actually charge more than Marvel because people are used to what the current prices for comic books are. Now, I really do think that ultimately all companies want to raise prices. That's always going to be the goal. Inflation is a thing. People are always going to want to raise their prices because that's how the world works. That's how commerce works. So maybe Marvel will still use this as an opportunity to increase their prices, even if they are not necessarily affected by the tariff. So I do think that at the end of the day, this is going to have a big effect on the end user. But this is sort of why, I think a lot of the industry is moving to kind of this more, Kickstarter, bespoke direct to consumer model. And if you are a publisher that just has to, be more premium in the product that you sell, to where it's like, you're not concerned with, the $5.99 comic book. Maybe this ultimately will benefit you because you'll have more of a direct relationship with your customer who is willing to spend more money with you because they like your product more, and you'll be able to kind of deliver them a more higher quality, thing, and you won't have to make as much. It's less about kind of fast comics and mass distribution and more of a high quality product to a specifically targeted audience. At least that's kind of what I think a lot of the indie publishers will be. But that being said, back to PSA and CGC, I really do think that this is interesting as it has an effect on the vintage comic market. If you're somebody out there who is submitting from Canada or internationally, are you going to have to charge more? And, I think the big concern for me is we need more people internationally to get into comic books. I mean, we have to kind of export this American hobby, this American art form, be it, vintage collecting or modern comic book reading. I think that, the comic industry has not done a good job sort of exporting the hobby overseas, and certainly adding higher costs to those international collectors and buyers and users is really not going to help the cause. Anyways, that's all for this video. That was me kind of going over this tariff news. Let me know what you guys think. Are you somebody out there who had been submitting to PSA? Is this directly affecting you? And what do you guys think about CGC overall? Do you think that it's only a matter of days before CGC has to come out with some statement? I'll put a link to all these articles in the description. You guys should definitely check them out. Read over them. I think that they're really great breakdowns. Let's try to keep it civil in the comments. I know that this is a very political thing, but either way, it's going to affect the comic industry, and it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. Anyways, that's all for this one. Like, comment, subscribe. See y'all in the next video.